Hello and welcome to my Lisianthus grow along. I have been looking forward to sowing this Lisianthus all summer long. So let's get started, because you're probably thinking, should I be doing this? Am I going to be successful? They are hands down one of the hardest crops that you can grow as a flower farmer. And if you're not a flower farmer, we'll take you through the steps. So don't worry. But there is some equipment that you will need to be successful. And what I will say is, don't think that you can get away with not using the necessary equipment, because you will fail. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to say, oh, well, maybe it will be okay. It won't. It absolutely won't be okay. You need to use the equipment. You need to follow the instructions literally to the letter to succeed. I see so many people trying to grow Lisianthus, and even last year I had a bit of a nightmare with my Lisianthus. I'll talk about that and I'll tell you why. I did follow the instructions, but a couple of things got in the way, which meant that even some of my crops failed last year. And I'll take you through that and why and what you need to do to avoid it. So the first thing that you will need is you will probably need a heat mat. Now it's quite warm now, but you may be sowing through to November. Got Lisianthus 1, 2 and 3s. And the 1s and 2s can be sown through August, September, through October as well. You can sow those. And then the 3s you can sow kind of November, December into January as well, really. I would try and sow them as soon as possible to give them the longest time to establish and to grow. So through those colder months, you will need a source of heat for them to germinate, okay? They don't need it after that, but they do need it for germination. So they need about 21 degrees C for germination, which you will only get from a heat mat in those months. The other thing that you will need is some grow lights, or a grow light, depending on how many you're growing. Again, this is non-negotiable. Just don't bother. You are wasting your time and wasting your effort if you sow them and you don't use a grow light. If you've gone to the trouble of buying the seed and spending the money on the seed, then get some grow lights, because it will give you success that you just will not get without the grow lights. And I'll tell you why as we go through and sow them. So let's make a start, because there are a few things that you do need to remember. And as I say, you need to follow to the letter. So let's get going. Okay, so first off, let's talk about compost. So I'm not sowing a huge amount of Lisianthus. I know some of you do sow lots and lots of Lisianthus. So I'm just sowing into pots like this, and I'm going to sow 1 packet of seed. There are 15 seeds in this pack into 1 pot. You do not need a huge big tray like this if you're only sowing like single packets, okay? And the compost that you need is a seed compost. This is one rule that I break quite a lot. I generally, for the rest of my seeds, I don't really use a seed compost. I just find that my general purpose compost does work really well, I'll be honest. So I cheat and I just use that. For Lisianthus, I won't be doing that. Lisianthus is too delicate, it's too expensive, it's too difficult to grow, to cheat and try and take shortcuts, okay? So you need to make sure you've got really good soil contact. That's one reason. It's the right pH and it's got the right amount of nutrients in it. So again, if you're spending the time and the effort to learn to grow Lisianthus, then get yourself some seed compost in. You can buy it in quite small bags. And I'm using the John Innes #1, okay? So you can get this anywhere, which is why I'm using it. What I didn't want to do was use any other kind of specialist compost that I may be able to get hold of as a grower that you can't get hold of yourselves at home. So I wanted to make sure that we were on an even footing. I'm using what you're using, and this is available nationwide, which is why I have chosen to use this rather than anything else. Okay, so I filled my pots with some compost, and I've just kind of I've used each one to just kind of tamp them down a little bit, so I've got a nice flush surface. And then what I'm going to do, I'm actually sowing Echo Pink, and they come in a little vial just like this. And the reason they come in a vial is because they're coated. And you can just, oh, let's see if we can show you them. You can just see they're bright yellow. And that is actually, what is it? It's clay. It's actually clay. And so each one of them is coated with clay because they are so small. They are literally like dust. You wouldn't be able to sow them nice and evenly if they weren't coated. So it makes counting them easier and it makes sowing them easier. The clay also has some nutrients in it that they need. Okay, so all you're going to do, and seed sowing is easy. You don't sow them in a different way to what you sow any other seed, essentially. You're just going to gently sow them on the surface of the soil, and some of them have gone down the edge, so I am actually going to just move them away from the edge because I don't want them down the sides of the pot. Let me show you those. So you can just see the seeds sitting on the surface of the soil there. And you're not going to bury them because they do need light to germinate. What you are going to do is mist them. So you need to get yourself a water sprayer like this, and you're going to mist them, okay? And what the misting does is it coats the pellets, the clay on the pellets, it coats them with water, and then they start to dissolve. So that clay needs to dissolve because the seed is inside. Okay, so if you don't mist them, I mean, they will still germinate eventually, but it will just take them a little bit longer. They should germinate in 2 to 3 weeks, especially if you're misting them every day. Then it would just speed up that process of the clay degrading on there, and then you'll get a little bit quicker germination. Okay, so that's I'm going to sow 2 packets. I'll sow the other packet, and then what I'll do is I will take you inside and I'll show you what I'm going to do with these. So I've brought the seedlings into my studio, and there's a reason why I brought these into my studio rather than leaving them inside my shed. So the shed will get really cold at night and it will get really hot during the day, and I don't really have any way of controlling the temperature. And the other thing that Lisianthus need is a very controlled temperature. So in my studio, I know it's an ambient temperature. I've got a little thermometer on the wall here. So I've had my blinds up today and it's gone up to 23 degrees C, which is a little bit too warm for Lisianthus, okay? So what I'm going to have to do is actually bring all of the blinds down to make sure that it doesn't go above 21 degrees C. That's what they need. So we're in September at the moment and it is quite sunny outside. And what I will find is as the weeks go on, the temperature will cool. We'll have less sunshine, the temperature will cool, I'll be able to open the blinds. But if it carries on getting this warm, I will actually have to take my tray, and I have a tray here to put them in. I will actually have to take the tray indoors where it's a little bit cooler. So the other reason why I have them in my studio is because I come in here every single day and I can keep my eye on them. If I leave them in my shed, I know I only go down there every couple of weeks. Although I'll be doing a lot of seed sowing coming up, but still, this way I know that I will actually be able to look after them properly in here. So, I don't need a heat mat at the moment. I'll be sowing my last Lisianthus seed probably in November, and I'll sow them from now right through to November. Probably every couple of weeks I'll sow some, and I'll be sowing the different varieties, and then the 1, the 2s and the 3s, which will then flower in that order as well next year. So what I'm going to do with these now, I've labelled them up, I'm going to put them in my tray. And then let me show you my grow light setup. So I've got them in here. I'll put them actually at this end so they're nearest the grow lights. The grow light that I've been using for years is just this kind of really simple and easy one. It comes on a stand, so it can go taller, it can go shorter. So you can get them quite close to your seeds. I think I'm going to put them on the lowest setting that I possibly can. So if I show you these grow lights, you may not be able to see on here. Let's see if we can show you those lights. Okay, so these grow lights are on a timer. Now, this is why my Lisianthus actually failed last year. I had them on a timer. However, we were having work done on our house, and every time we needed to do some electrics, the electric went off. I was at work quite often and I didn't even know the electric had gone off. And then I'd come in here kind of 2 days later and realise, oh, hang on a minute, why aren't my grow lights on? Oh dear, the electric's gone off again. So I'd reset them, and then the next day the same thing would happen. Oh, and then the next day the same thing would happen. And this carried on for weeks and weeks and weeks. Now, they did eventually germinate, which is fine, but they actually then started to rosette. They never really grew, and that was because they weren't getting the light that they needed, okay? So we're going to use the light to give them between 14 and 16 hours daylight a day. Now, you can use natural daylight if you've got enough of it, but as the days shorten, you're going to need to put it on for longer and longer and longer. And actually, rather than having to keep faffing around with it, it's easier to just put it on either 14 or 16 hours. This set of grow lights that I have currently, I can set them to 6, 12 or 16. I don't have an option of 14, so they'll be set on 16 during the day. So even if it's a cloudy day, they'll still get high strength, okay? So that's the first point. Now, when you get your grow lights, and I think I did just manage to, I can't quite get the angle right to show you the colours, and you can't quite see on the screen, but you can see there are slightly different colours in there. Okay, you can just see that. So if I change that spectrum, you can see these ones are fully white. That's no good for growing the Lisianthus. You need the blue and the red in there as well. So this one is mostly white, and I'm trying to get an angle. You can't actually see on the angle, but it's mostly white with some red, green and some yellow in there. And then the other option is mainly yellow with a bit of blue, bit of red and a bit of white in there. Now, that's not the one that you need. If you buy grow lights and they are kind of multi-function, essentially, just make sure that you set them to the one that is mainly white with the blue, the red and the bits of yellow, because it will mimic daylight. Now, the other one with the mainly yellow, that one, it mimics daylight as well, but it's mainly for flowering and fruiting. It encourages flowering and fruiting, and I'm not that technical. I don't know why, but it does. The one you need is mainly white, blue, red, yellow, okay? And certainly not just the white one on its own. Okay, so you're going to set your grow lights. Let me pop you down here again. You're going to set your grow lights, and the other thing you're going to do is you're going to pop this lid on like this. Okay, so that's going to keep them nice and humid. It's going to keep them really, really nice and moist. And then every few days until they germinate, you're going to spritz them with a little bit of water to encourage that seed coat to dissolve, okay? And then once they have germinated, you're going to take the lid off. You don't need the lid once they've actually germinated. Also, if you have them on a heat mat, they will not need that heat mat after they've germinated, especially at this time of year. So you actually need to reduce the temperature from the 21 you've given them. You need to reduce that temperature to kind of between 10 and 15 degrees. So they are a hardy annual. They can take a little bit of cold. Essentially, they don't need to be heated. If you carry on heating them and you carry on and you leave them at 21 degrees C, or even warmer than 21, if you get to kind of 23, 25 degrees C, if they haven't germinated yet, they won't germinate. If they are growing, you will stall them. This is called rosetting. And when they don't receive enough daylight, and when they don't receive heat, or it's too hot, they will rosette. So the leaves will essentially lay flat on the soil. They won't grow. You won't get flowers on them. This is exactly what happened to me last year. They just got stressed because they weren't getting the light that they needed. The heat mat was fine because the heat mat came back on again, but the lights, you know, if you have a power cut, your lights won't come back on again. So you do need to think about that. Okay, so I'm going to leave them here in the corner of my studio. I'm going to put my blinds down because it's a bit too warm for them at the moment. going to put my blinds down, and then I'll keep an eye on that temperature. I might take them inside just to make sure they don't go above 21 degrees. And then in about 2 to 3 weeks, they should have germinated. Okay, so I hope you've been taking notes, but don't worry if you haven't. Everything is explained in the blog, so you don't need to remember everything. Just follow the instructions in the blog that I've given now, okay? And by next spring, you should have something that you can put out into the garden.
Night night, Lisianthus babies.
Okay, so now that you've sowed your seeds, you need to make sure that you do keep them moist at this stage, okay? So before they've germinated, you're gonna keep this lid on them. You are going to mist them every day to encourage that seed coat to dissolve, and that's going to keep them nice and moist. At this stage, if they're allowed to dry out, then they just won't germinate, okay? But once they have germinated, you can then allow the soil to just dry out a little bit in between waterings. They still need plenty of water, but you can just leave the soil to dry out just slightly in between as well, okay? You also need to feed them weekly with some kind of general purpose fertilizer. So I think I'll probably just use seaweed, liquid seaweed again, and I do that at half strength every week, and then that keeps them it keeps them growing. And then roughly around 8 to 12 weeks after they've germinated, they will then be ready to transplant. If all goes well, they'll be small, but they should have 4 sets of leaves. They'll be ready for transplanting. And at that stage, you can then use a general purpose compost that has some more nutrients in as well. And in around 5 months' time, so we're talking March, April time next year, they should be ready to then plant out into your patch, garden, wherever it is that you are planting them. You'll need to harden them off gradually. They will still be small, but resist the temptation to keep them in the pots too long. You can plant them out, but just be mindful of the weather. You know, if it's snowing outside, then don't put them out. I don't know what the weather's going to be like in 5 months. So you'll just need to use a little bit of experience then as well. I'll let you know when I'm planting mine out. And you can also cover them with a low tunnel, or if you have a greenhouse, you can put them inside a greenhouse as well. Greenhouse is best because it actually protects them from the rain. You shouldn't really leave them outdoors without protection because the rain will actually damage the petals. So that's it really now. The seeds are sowed. We just need to wait for them to germinate, and good luck.